early 1990s, Hurricane Andrew had hit the southern part of Miami, and it basically devastated parts of our house, but most of my neighbors' houses and the entire community that I kind of grew up in. And I just remember going back there as a kid and seeing the houses that were destroyed, and stray dogs in the streets, and family photos all over the streets, just people without water. And I just remember seeing for the first time as a child what nature can do to our society. And I wouldn't say that necessarily influenced my architectural career, but I like to think that it kind of had an early beginning to the crafting of my heart for this subject. And I really think that it's something that's these major disasters are just so heartfelt. In terms of just my career, I feel like it really began just in the process of getting involved in architecture at an early age. My family was always renovating houses, and it seems like our house was always a construction project, whether it's just some type of small thing. But I'd like to say that my mom probably had a huge influence on my architecture path. And so I pursued an education in architecture and worked as a carpenter for a little while. But in college, I started to understand sort of the value of design as a service, and as a service meaning what can we do for others. And I developed this passion for how architecture can respond to communities of need. And I also developed a passion for climate change and understanding sustainability and energy efficiency and dealing with water systems. So I essentially had this thesis project that was a conceptual library of climate change. I believe it to be one of the only of its type. I can't think of too many libraries today, actual buildings, that are only focused on having information dedicated to climate change. And I thought of it as a resource for the world's top leading climate scientists at the time. And so the building that I designed was this flood resilient building, and it could deal with sea level rise issues from 2100 to maybe even 2200 for example. It was almost like a flood resilient tank. And so a couple of weeks before my final thesis presentation, Hurricane Sandy had hit New York. And so my thesis topic in the studio, which was kind of like far-fetched, this kind of crazy idea of a flood resilient building, became one of the hottest in the studio.
Really?
And it was really kind of about timing. The thesis topic was kind of explosive in a way. Can we actually design buildings to withstand extreme storm surge events? And so that was kind of the premise of it. So I took that body of research, my thesis, and I applied for a research grant at the Boston Architectural College. So I went to the Boston Architectural College, and I won this grant. And my proposal was to travel to the Netherlands and to Bangladesh, and to live there and to learn from one of the most advanced water-focused societies that is dedicating so much and so many resources towards it, and to also live in Bangladesh to understand people who have been displaced by climate-related disasters. So I really saw it as kind of seeing two different approaches to the issue. And I looked at it in kind of a scale of actually multiple scales, macro to micro. I looked at it as what is the Dutch policy that's kind of in shape or in place to deal with these issues? How are communities and dealing with these issues, and how are individuals dealing with these issues? So by the community, it could be anywhere from city planners to architects to basically people planning for this, and how are the people actually living with it? And then I did the same thing for the Netherlands. What are the policies that are in place? Who are the people that are talking about these issues, and who are the people that have been affected by these major disasters that happened in Dhaka and the southern parts of Bangladesh. And so I like to think that that really kind of influenced my entire career direction. And so I work for Perkins Will. We're an architecture firm. We are one of the largest in the world, and we are we have developed a research arm within the firm that focuses on this, and I'm heavily a part of that, and I'm honored to be a part of this team that is forward thinking and thinking of ways to move the industry to be more and act and think more resiliently.
Yeah, Perkins does have the research labs, as you call them, as the firm calls them, and one of the labs is a resilience lab, and I've kind of been following their work for a while now, and Perkins is also an advisory partner company to the Rockefeller Foundation's 100 Resilient Cities initiative. So the firm, I mean, you should feel at home, right? I mean, the firm happens to be perhaps, among the major architectural global firms, a leader, not the only one, but certainly one of the leaders in this space. And
absolutely, Alex.
So it's great that you are in the Boston office working in that Resilience Lab team.
Absolutely, and it's been great to collaborate with folks across the firm who have a same passion as I do. And I'm one of the key leads of our Boston office, and I've taken an active leadership role in the firm-wide lab and the firm-wide task force.
Okay, so water, and I was reading some of that fantastic research work you did in the Netherlands and Bangladesh, and some of the other work you've done, and now we know of the three major water challenges that have to do with climate resilience, right? There's access and scarcity, there's quality and safety, and there's flooding and sea level rise. And so the three are complex, they intersect, and they will be at the center of the climate debate if they're not already. Let's take each one at a time and just run quickly through your insights or your take on each one. Now, access and scarcity, I mean, it's just such a huge issue, right? And it's sparking water wars and conflicts and migration issues just from people running out of fresh water. And especially in Asia and Africa and some of these developing countries where the clash is just epic. As population grows and water declines, we have all kinds of issues, and people just don't have the resources to deal effectively with that. But it also hits developed countries as well. So on access and scarcity, what are some of your thoughts and some of the ways that we can deal with that and build a more resilient society and planet as climate change worsens?
There's a quote that I know of. He's a professor out of University of Bergen in Norway, and his name's I would butcher his name because I'm not good at speaking Norwegian, but I think it's like Terje Teravad. He wrote a lot of very interesting books on just water and water scarcity and water challenges, and I've been following his work pretty heavily. But the quote is, "The more that we try to control water, the more water controls us." And so I think that we need to be more dynamic in the way that we think of the way we live with water. We almost need to act like water. We need to be the water. We need to be able to be formless and shapeless like water, and we need to be able to go with the ebb and flow of the way that Earth's systems and our natural systems are actually working. And so for these areas that don't have enough water, I think that it's a challenge because we're constantly fighting against it. I think that we need to work with the way that the systems are working. And maybe I'm a bit too forward thinking in that manner, and I'm not saying that everybody should completely relocate, but I do think that we need to work with the systems instead of against them. We shouldn't be trying to control our water systems. I think we need to let them ebb and flow. And I do think that we have the technology today to create opportunities for clean water for everyone in the world. There's this incredible engineer out of New Hampshire. I think he actually invented the Segway, and he developed this way of it's like this machine that can literally clean water out of dirty puddles and make it available for anybody to drink water. But his issue is that he can't get this machine anywhere in the world. It's just so hard for him to get it in these remote places where people don't have access to water. But it turns out there's major companies like Coca-Cola, for example, that has access to these very far remote places of the world. And so maybe there's a way that there could be a partnership between this tool and some of the water scarcity challenges. And so I think that the engineer is actually working with this team. So I don't know the engineer off the top of my head, but I can follow up with that. So from an architectural perspective, I think that it comes back to, I think we need to work with our ecological systems. We need to build our economy based on our ecology instead of the opposite, if that makes sense. Our economy needs to focus on our ecology. And I think that this is one of the biggest challenges that we as humans face. How do we transform and shift our thinking to kind of think of the collective instead of ourselves? And I think that with technology changing and companies like Uber and Airbnb and these very participatory organizations are developing, I think that there's a new power in the collective, and there's a new power of participatory action and participatory power that is going to change the way that we tackle these issues. So I don't know if that answered your question, Alex.
Well, actually, yeah, I mean, a very creative, unusual way, which I'm very thankful for, because, I mean, that question could have been, would probably be answered in a far more conventional way by others. And so thank you for that. So when we think about the collective, when we think about that power, that really shift that's taking place already across many market segments, and apply it to solutions for water scarcity or access to water in different ways. I mean, let's take, for example, water desalination plants and how we can turn ocean water into fresh water. It's been extremely challenging up to now around the world, given the energy expense of doing that. Quite a few innovations going on to address that challenge and make it a lot less costly to do that. Certainly would go a long way towards solving this access and scarcity problem around the world. But when we apply that collective sharing economy component or layer that you're highlighting to that really opens up a world of opportunities beyond just having a company come into town with a water desalination infrastructure facility and then the city buying that water and distributing it in very conventional ways. Perhaps we can be looking at a more of a collective cooperative way to use and distribute that water, or maybe own the desalination plant to begin with. And that's an interesting layer there that you bring to the table. That's kind of interesting.
Absolutely. And if you look at kind of, it's kind of like the water diamond paradox, right? Everybody needs water to survive. Without water, there's no life. So, but diamonds are more expensive than water, right? So I think that we need to focus. We need to find a way to make water one of the most incredible resources we have. It is the essence of life, and it should be treated that way. And I think it's a cultural shift that needs to happen.
Absolutely.
Across the globe.
In fact, it applies also to the second big challenge, which is quality and safety. And climate change, again, is just making that a lot more daunting, a lot more challenging when a flood happens, when a storm happens, with one of these climate impacts takes place and our water quality worsens. Not to mention the growth in urban populations and the challenge that that is creating for water authorities around the planet. And so, any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on how to make sure that we keep our water bacteria-free and disease-free, and so where it is available, where folks are not having scarcity issues, that they not run into health issues with their water. What have you kind of run into in terms of quality and safety that kind of stands out in your mind?
In terms of quality and safety, I'm not necessarily a water quality expert, but I can speak on behalf of what I think could help. I think that we all need to become sort of gardeners in a way. We need to find ways to harness what we have and almost garden what we have. Instead of building these enormous infrastructural projects, we need to find a way to take what we have and garden it. And it's almost like the simple way. Like if you and I and everybody else decided to start a garden, for example, in our apartment or in our backyard, or if we all became sort of farmers, everybody could eat. If we all became sort of, and I guess that metaphor kind of relates back to the water in a way. If we could all find a way to harness and clean our own, then we could all have that. But when I think of cleaning water, I think of nature's systems to do so. If anything's going to clean water, nature's going to do it the best. So our deltas are Earth's natural way of filtering water. And I think that we need to make a bigger investment in our deltas. And our deltas happen to be our cities. Most cities are built up on some form of a delta of a river that flows through the city. And so I think that we need to make a bigger investment into building our river resources and building up our ecological habitat that's in our cities.
Yeah, in fact, I read in your Netherlands piece that the Dutch refer to delta works. I think it is right. Delta works is the phrase they use to describe their 60 or 70-year-old water infrastructure program, and so the use of that delta concept is really interesting. But also your reference not just to nature's way of cleaning water, but to having people kind of take matters into their own hands. And if you're going to use water, make sure that you can clean it yourself, and there are ways of doing it, and so that we're not vulnerable to whatever water comes out of the faucet. And so,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, Alex. I'm talking about so there's like a passive way, and then it's almost like an active way. We need to all be active in the solution. I think that resiliency starts at an individual level, and we as individuals need to respond and act on behalf of the change we want to see.
Now, the third and final big impact that climate change is having on water is flooding and sea level rise. And sea level, I mean, you're from Miami, right? So it's ground zero in the U.S. in terms of sea level rise, and teams of people looking at that challenge in South Florida. But across the country, really, and across the world, sea level has become a here and now issue, not just an issue to deal with, 30, 40 years from now or by the end of the century, because by then it'll be too late to become resilient. The time to become resilient is now.
Yeah.
To do whatever it is that we need to do to prepare for that sea level rise of 1 meter to 5 meters between now and at the end of the century. So, I mean, the projections are kind of like uncertain at the moment, but we're looking, I think the best estimates say that it'll be about 1 meter, maybe a couple of feet by mid-century, and then it'll just keep going from there to 3 to 5 meters by the end of the century. And so and flooding, of course, flooding from storms, flooding from just simple rain events that turn into a major flood issue. I mean, right now, Japan is going through an epic flood event, Hurricane Harvey last year in this country. And so they've become so unpredictable. They have become so, it can happen anywhere, anytime. Any one of these epic, flood events. They're no longer 100-year flood events. They're now a lot more frequent and a lot more intense.
Absolutely.
So, any thoughts, any ideas that you can share with us in terms of what a city, what a company, even a family can do to prepare for these more frequent, more intense flood and sea level events up until the moment, if obviously the coastal communities are already dealing with the possibilities of relocating or retreating from the coastlines. And we see stories of that happening a lot more frequently nowadays. I mean, now we read a story about that every other day. Some community here or there that has decided to take a look at retreat, at relocation. Always painful, always difficult, but it's become an inevitable conversation to have. And but short of that, also, any other thoughts or insights to share?
Well, based on my research, Alex, I think that it really kind of comes down to communication. I think that this is about everybody, and everybody has a stake in the game. And it really kind of comes down to that initial talk that we just had, which is about, the building on the participatory, the new power. And, there are no superheroes to sort of save us from these disasters. We are really kind of, we need a team of multidisciplinary experts to solve these challenges. We need people from across disciplines to look at this and to come together and to plan for it, to survive, to continue to thrive. I think we need to accept the changes that are coming. And as I said before, I think we need to literally be the water. We need to understand that it's coming. We can't fight it. We need to find ways to live with it. We need to find ways to work with it. And we need to be flexible. I think we need to be adaptable. The concept of these major barriers, I think are not the solutions that will really kind of bring us to the long term. I think they're short-term thinking solutions. I think that we need to develop ways that our infrastructure can be adaptive in multiple different levels. I think we need to find ways that our societies can be adaptive in multiple levels. If you look at, we are the only kind of species on the planet that doesn't really migrate, right? I mean, you look at the birds, they're literally going up and north and south as the climate is changing. I think that there's a lot of lessons we can take from Earth's natural cycles. And I think that we need to find ways to live with that and to really be a part of that. And I know that this is really kind of high up aspirational thinking, Alex, but I really can't think of another solution that really kind of gets us to the future without taking these steps. I think that is the future. I think yes, maybe barriers are kind of like the step in that direction to kind of help us plan for that. But long term, I really think it's about being flexible. If you look at a river, for example, a river, it doesn't just flow straight. It's constantly winding. It's literally expanding and contracting. And I think when we try to control a river and we try to put these concrete barriers on two sides of the river, we're almost kind of creating a straw for the water to just flow. And the water flows to a place that maybe we don't necessarily want it to. I think that we need to be dynamic, just like the way a river works. We need to move and work the way that Earth systems does. And I really can't repeat it enough. If you look at nature systems, if you go to the same part of a forest one year and then the next year, it's going to look very different. And it's the way that nature is designed. It's the way that it designs itself. And so I think in our built environment, I think we need to be flexible. We need to find things that we absolutely cannot sacrifice. We need to save, but I think there are things that we need to sacrifice. There are spaces that we need to give up. For hundreds of years, us as a society, we as a society have been constantly taking away from the landscape. We've been taking away from nature. And I think that nature's kind of calling it back. I think that nature is taking back what we have taken. And so we need to create room for this. We need to create room for the ecological habitat that once used to exist in our cities, and we need to bring it back.
Yeah, it's almost like the reverence or the relationship that Native Americans had, still have, but when they were the only ones here, and not just Native Americans, but Native populations generally around the world used to have that relationship with nature. They used to be more willing to migrate and to move and to make those adjustments. So your calling is, again, for that mind shift, for that cultural change in the way we think about nature, the way we approach the built environment and our cities and the places we love. And perhaps we have to love them with less attachment, with less insistence on staying at very high risk. And so now I do want to congratulate you, though, because for a built environment architecture professional, a person who works with construction all the time, it's refreshing to have that vision and that level of really that sensitivity to a deeper way of approaching this challenge than just having another gadget or another app or another technology. And as good as those solutions are, perhaps we have to balance them out with a different kind of vibe, a different way of thinking and approaching these issues.
I agree, Alex. I think that, and thank you for noticing that. Sometimes I think that building is not the answer. Sometimes I think it's gardening. And I think that we need to find ways that our built environment can also work with the natural environment, and everything needs to be synced. I think that our cities could be the biggest ecological environments that we have on the planet. They could literally be the showcase. We can literally create nature systems here in our cities and create space for it. And to be honest, there's tremendous health benefits to doing that. There's research on how nature makes us feel, and it makes us feel great. And the more we're surrounded by nature, the happier we are. And so why not invest into nature and bring it into our cities and create room for nature to flourish in our cities and allow our built environment to thrive with it.
And that, of course, will make us more resilient as well. So,
absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Arlen, for your insights, for your refreshing approach and vision. And good luck with your future work. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Alex.